All right, hello everyone. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here at our Innovation Summit in Bella Center, Copenhagen. I'm Fabien Chene. I'm leading our SE Advisory Services for Europe, and I'm joined today by Connor Taylor, Principal Analysts at Verdantix. Connor, you want to say a few words, introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much, Fabien. Yeah, I'm Connor Taylor, Principal Analyst at Verdantix. I've been covering the climate change and sustainability consulting space for up to 5 years now. And yeah, very excited to be here and talk about services. I think it's a good time we're having this conversation. There's been a lot of tumultuous activity in the world this year. I think firms really need the guidance of services to help them adjust their climate transition plans amid geopolitical risk, climate risk, and just general economic volatility.
So maybe, Connor, what we can do is just move and deep dive really on the topic. A lot of conversations around, you mentioned it, climate transition. And I guess my first question for you is, in Europe specifically, a lot of companies are right now in their overall decarbonization journey. I guess they need to accelerate big time in order to hit their different goals. And so I guess now the question comes more on the services side and on the vendor sides. Who are having a lot of pressure in order to serve these companies in their decarbonization journey. From your lenses, what are the challenges that these vendors are facing in that regards, please?
Yeah, so I think if we cast our minds back to sort of 2019, 2020, that was really the wave of net zero ambition and activity, right? And we saw all these highly optimistic pledges, net zero by 2050, we're going to align our corporate strategy with the Paris Agreement, ambition of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees. And I think 5 years on, due to a range of factors, right, some of those ambitious strategies have been revealed to be a bit too challenging to actually implement. And 2025 is quite symbolic, right? We're halfway towards 2030 when a lot of those intermediate targets were set. And in general, what we're seeing at Verdantix is this idea of strategic fragmentation. So previously, everyone's very aligned on the net zero journey of what you're going to do. And now we're sort of facing the challenge of implementing that amid energy volatility, geopolitical volatility, increasing climate risk. I mean, we hit 1.5 degrees for a short while this year. France already warmed to 1.7 degrees. So what we're actually seeing is vendors, organizations now taking individual transition paths. Before they were all aligned on a general journey to 1.5. And now every single organization is saying, what's my risk exposure? How can I decarbonize while being, economically viable? What's my pressing business continuity concern? So what vendors have to do and providers of services, they have to say, okay, everyone wanted the same SBTi net zero target. Now every firm wants something different. And that's going to fragment along industry lines or among location. Essentially, we're seeing idiosyncratic climate strategies. Couple that with the need to obviously, I guess, mitigate some of this climate risk, which is very much in the forefront, and maintain business operations. You're now looking at every firm needs a unique strategy, and it has to be one that doesn't go parallel to the core business fundamental of making money and being operational. So I think that's the major challenge for delivery of services, right? How do you get into that new mindset? Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And so with that in mind, how is Schneider Electric reacting to some of these challenges?
Thanks, Connor, for raising the question. I think you're really spot on. As a matter of fact, we launched yesterday our new consulting brand, SE Advisory Services, with one simple end in mind, which is really helping and serving these companies in their decarbonization journey, moving from strategy to implementation or to action. In other words, commitments are great, but action is even better. And what we realized over the years is that fundamentally companies and corporates were struggling in three main domain of the energy management lifecycle. The first one is everything related, and you mentioned it, I think, Connor, everything related to energy costs and overall energy and risks management. And some companies have understood over the years that having a strong energy procurement strategy in place, by the way, whether it's brown power, but of course renewable energy, is really something key in order to mitigate risks. And speaking about risks, there's not only the energy risks, but there's more and more the climate risks, both physical risks and transition risks to identify and to mitigate. So we kind of see this first pillar, which is everything related to energy and risk management. Second, everything related to resource optimization and resource management, which is, in fact, the first decarbonization lever to activate and implement everything related to energy efficiency. In all climate scenarios, we always start with the cheapest megawatt hour, which is, at the end of the day, the one we don't consume. Third one, it's everything related to sustainable transformation. And here you mentioned it, I think, Connor, but it's really serving these companies or helping these companies move the needle from SBTi commitments, et cetera, to actual implementation. So you can kind of see that between sustainable transformation, resource management and optimization, and of course, energy and risk mitigation, there's a trilemma here. And the core of this trilemma is data. Because if you don't have data coming from your invoices, your contracts, your consumption, subconsumption, all of that translated into real-time Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions reporting, it's going to be a struggle. So therefore, long story short, to introduce a little bit more SC advisory services around these three pillars, what we are here for is essentially on three different stages or steps. First one is strategic advisory, to really help companies understand what a realistic but also ambitious climate strategy means. What does it mean to align on SBTi commitments? What's my operational roadmap? What's the business case, et cetera, et cetera. Second, I talked about data, and therefore having a strong data foundations with intelligent technology backed by AI is fundamental today. I think that we are in a period of time where AI is going to be necessary to unleash the sustainable transformation. And then third, it's obviously everything related to implementation, because at the end of the day, what matters the most, as I said earlier on, is a seamless implementation across the full spectrum of the decarbonization levers. So in essence, that's more or less what we do inside SC Advisory Services, from strategic advisory to intelligent technology to seamless implementation. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yeah.
And so maybe kind of to bounce back on that, I've spoken about sustainable transformation, spoken about how data is key, and therefore more and more we're talking about a sustainable and digital transformation, which needs in a way to go hand in hand. I'm curious really to understand how you're seeing today companies move the needle in that regards, and are there any challenges when it comes to specifically digital transformation?
Yeah, I think, look, first off, it's a massive challenge, right? Despite there being 5 years now of us operating in this net zero mindset, a wide array of software tools coming out, new markets emerging, even for things like carbon reporting, climate risk, nature, most firms still operate a highly disjointed and dysfunctional data stack for climate technology. And what's the problem with that? Well, you can't work out what the ROI is on your initiatives, then you can't finance them because the CFO is saying what's happening here, and you can't act in an agile manner. So I think that's one of the major problems. If you look at many organizations, right, they'll have a separate digital tool for reporting, separate digital tool across their plants and processes. And of course, we're talking about climate here, right? So you have the supply chain, you have procurement, as well as your ERP, right? And these are all repositories of data that you need. If you want to report on your emissions, fine. But if you also just want to understand your operational cost, efficiency, I think the key driving factor behind transformation at the moment, if you're a corporate listening to this, it should be less about managing your reporting. It should be more about where can I drive efficiencies, which ultimately will reduce your emissions, right, while giving you a tangible financial ROI. So that's some of the problems. We are seeing strides being made in this space. Quite slowly, I will admit. I think AI has a great power to act as that data management layer, especially from a carbon and climate risk perspective. If you think about reporting, right, you have all this activity data that you need to put a carbon factor on, and you need to report it, right? AI has got immense potential there to provide value and I guess boost efficiencies in the system. I would say that the big task for firms now is getting ready for that. We're maybe a little bit too early to say, okay, AI right now is going to revolutionize your climate strategy. But you really do need to get ready and have your data in a stack where you can use AI when it comes available. And from a digital transformation perspective, I would say that's those are some of the main issues. It'll be interesting to hear sort of how Schneider is using digital in its service delivery. How do your digital offerings, which obviously Schneider is famous for, combine with your advisory offerings?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think, just to bounce back on what you just illustrated, Scope 3, for example, is a key challenge. And we know it's specifically around the supply chain. Because not only today it's a matter of having an accurate Scope 3 emissions reporting, for sure, to have an accurate baseline. But second, it's going much more granular on each and every supplier, and therefore on each and every product carbon footprint. So at the end of the day, what you need to do is reconcile the corporate carbon footprints with the product carbon footprints. And here, this is where it starts to become super complex, because you need to deal with a lot of emissions factors, with a lot of LCAs, and really reconcile and bundle that into an aggregated corporate carbon footprints. This is where AI can fundamentally help. And this is where we really believe in Schneider Electric that AI can accelerate in having that strong foundation in regards to, I'll call it, real-time carbon footprint, specifically on Scope 3. So it's just to highlight one example. Now, overall, from a digital transformation standpoint, instead of highlighting some high-level examples, I'd like really to take dedicated customer examples where we serve them along their journey through both a sustainable and digital transformation. We've been serving a long-lasting customer, Roca, who's a leader in the bathroom business. And essentially, it all started with helping Roca understand what it means to be aligned with a 1.5 degrees trajectory. So along the way, we've been building that dedicated roadmap with the different decarbonization levers to strive through that 1.5 degrees trajectory. That was one step. But afterwards, of course, what was really important is to implement the decarbonization levers. It was a lot about renewable energy procurement, of course, energy efficiency, but where I want to come back to our discussion is around digital transformation. And they've understood that by digitizing their plants, by digitizing their assets, they could identify quick wins, they could improve their efficiency, they could be much more leaner in terms of operational excellence. And this is what we've done progressively. It's to identify use cases that at the end of the day would be beneficial for them, not only, of course, for their overall sustainability and carbon footprint, but also from a competitiveness and industrialization standpoints. So this is, I hope, a great example where by combining sustainability and digital, it could lead to resilience, it could lead to competitiveness, and it could lead, of course, to sustainability.
Yeah, and I think just playing off of that, that's a really good example of how climate strategy and sustainability strategies are no longer sort of a siloed, separate goal and initiative. Right, you mentioned there the co-benefits from efficiency and boosting how, I guess, the operational abilities of a company. But ultimately, that's how you reduce emissions, right? I think what we're seeing at Verdantix is sustainability, climate transition, resiliency being embedded into normal business strategy workflows, right? If you're trying to decarbonize, well, ultimately, how are you going to do that? Renewable energy. Well, then resiliency comes in. Do you need a microgrid? Do you really want to burn Scope 2? And then you're exposed to volatile gas prices. So that's an interesting example of the convergence, I guess, of operational strategy and what was previously a reporting voluntary kind of initiative into overarching and core business priorities.
I totally align, Connor. Maybe to conclude, I think that today in the overall debate, we tend sometimes to oppose sustainability and business performance. At Schneider Electric, we are deeply convinced that, in fact, the two go hand in hand. In other words, to simplify, doing well for the wallet means also doing good for the planet, and vice versa. And by reconciling both business and sustainability, I think it's a great manner to accelerate the climate and energy transition. Connor, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much,
Really
Fabien.
appreciate the exchange. Thank you
Thank you very much.